Do you remember when we started working on this research?
Yeah, I think it was London.
Yeah.
And I was giving this talk about knowledge sharing among chefs.
Yes, and I came to you and I asked, why don't we study the same thing some physicists?
I'm so glad you did. When it comes to fostering knowledge sharing, organizations often face a dilemma. They may want to encourage the sharing of knowledge, so to generate opportunities for learning and innovation. However, if such organizational knowledge spills over to competitors, it might erode their competitive advantage. Rita and I study how managers can act upon the climate of their organizations to govern the direction in which knowledge flows.
We embarked in an extensive field study of CERN, the largest particle physics laboratory in the world. CERN is organized around research teams, the largest of which are Atlas and CMS, the two organizations behind the discovery of the Higgs boson particle in 2012. Atlas and CMS were created to be in direct competition with one another, so to be able to replicate findings and ensure the validity of scientific discoveries. Also, they share a lot of institutional linkages through CERN, use the same key resources, the accelerator for instance, and have their headquarters physically co-located.
Yet, despite being so similar on paper, when talking to physicists affiliated with the two, we remark stark differences in how they described the climate of their organizations, as well as in how they talked about letting knowledge flow within or across organizational boundaries. Pushed by this observation, we decided to dig deeper and examine whether these differences in organizational climate could possibly explain the different sharing tendencies that we had observed. Overall, our data collection involved 2 cycles of theory building and theory testing, and relied on field observations, more than 50 interviews, a lab in the field experiment involving over 500 physicists, and finally, 2 lab experiments aimed at generalizing our results outside of CERN with about 400 participants.
Our findings show that employees are more likely to share organizational knowledge internally when they identify with the organization they belong to. However, when the organization they work for encourages them to outperform their coworker, we find that they prefer to leak knowledge to an employee from a competing organization, rather than pass it to a colleague working next door. To put it simply, despite creating a competitive climate inside your organization can have many positive effects, it is not ideal if you want to foster sharing of knowledge, and it may also expose you to the risk of information leakage.
So, if you observe or are worried about your organizational knowledge spilling over to your competitors, it may be time for you to act on your organizational climate.